this meeting to order. All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So move.
Can I get a second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Open forum. Would anybody like to speak? Okay, consent agenda. Approval of minutes, bills, purchases, approval of investments, EMT appointment, gambling resolution. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Public hearing, we doing that now, or?
We have to wait till 6 for that.
Okay, we'll just go on to reports then. Okay, reports, Stearns County Attorney. Would you like to come up and visit with us?
You bet. Good evening, Janelle Kendall, Stearns County Attorney, as well as your Melrose City Attorney. I've handed out the documents I'm going to go through, so let's start with the letter that we have. And it might be just the City Council that has those. This is our diversion report. The first thing that we talk about each year are the people who came into the system for the first time. Our diversion program is pretty limited because we do want to give those kind of first-time resources to truly first-timers. If you've already been through the system and you continue to have issues, then we deal with you in the system. But if you really truly are a first-time offender, we do want to give people a chance to have that conversation and make things better. And you did have 5 juveniles from Melrose go through diversion this last year. We used to do a lot more community service on that than we used to. What we found is, I think I explained to the council a couple years ago when we started working with your contract, we found that there was a certain category of persons on their first time through the system that if they got a postcard from my office, that was the last we ever heard of them. That had the intended effect. And sending them all the way through a 90-day program with a whole bunch of conversations, it was a lot of resources into the majority of the people who would just basically go and send no more. So we started putting those people through an online program and found the recidivism rate was pretty much basically the same. If they're going to have problems, they're going to have problems, and we identify them sooner as to which ones they are. And then those are moving up to a higher tier of actual intervention. We did have a couple of those kids that were at your higher level of intervention, but they made it through a diversion, and that went really well. So first, we talk about that. Then the second thing that we have is your city contract, and that looks like this. These are the cases that we get as your city attorney. If there are felony crimes committed, that comes to my office regardless. But what we do as your misdemeanor city attorney would be the DWIs, the shoplifting, those lower level offenses. And as you can see, your numbers were higher in 2017 than 16, but they basically look a lot like they did in 2015. We saw across the county and across the state crime generally go up in 2015. As the economy came back, so did crime. I don't know why it has that inverse relationship, but it just plain did. So we saw your numbers in 15, as you see, pretty comparable to what they were in 17. And there's nothing there that jumps out at us as unusual. We do have a fair amount of contact with your police department and with Chief Moss. He's not afraid to speak up if there's something that he needs or there's a question that he has. So we do have a fair amount of interaction with them, and we haven't noticed anything that would stick out as issues. As you look at the second page, you can see that your felony numbers are up. And those would be the more serious crimes, where someone's going to end up spending some time in jail, perhaps even going to prison. And what jumped out at me as I looked at those felony numbers is they are the vast, vast majority are marijuana. And to get to a felony level of marijuana, there's one in there that's 10 kilos, okay? We're not talking about a little bit that you got in your pocket. In order to even be a felony in Minnesota, you basically have to have a pickup full, is about what it takes a lot, okay? So marijuana is different, but you had a big one here, which tells you that your cops are paying attention, they know what they're doing. If it got to the point that we could charge it and get a felony conviction for something like that, then you know that people are following the rules and doing what they're supposed to be doing. There's also a few domestics in there. I think there's only one property crime. But the vast majority of your felony crimes in Melrose were drug crimes than they were marijuana. So when you look at the last handout, the one that's got all the big lists on it. I know you know what it looks like. This one. Those are the felonies across the county. So as you can see, we had almost 1,200 last year, and only 21 of them are yours. Okay? You've got a safe community, you have good law enforcement, they're paying attention to what's going on, and we're able to prosecute those cases. But as you can see when you look at that, generally numbers went up in 2015, they went up across the county. And if you look down at the bottom where we have types of adult criminal felony case filings, you'll see that drug numbers generally have gone up across the county. So it's not necessarily, it happens to be what the majority of the felony crimes were that were prosecuted here last year. But as you can see, it was up across the county, across the board. You may have read the recent article on the State Patrol that once they know what they're looking for, it's all over the place. We're having the same experience with sex trafficking. And that's one of the things that we're also seeing up in the smaller communities because we're looking at it for the first time. I was at the Belgrade City Council last night, and they have the dubious privilege of having one of the first felony convictions for solicitation of a minor out of Belgrade. So this has gone on everywhere since the dawn of time. It's the idea that now these laws are being looked at differently, they're being actually enforced, and we're going to get a chance to keep some of the people out of the sort of things that you're seeing in this kind of paperwork, and hope that we can not only do some accountability on the pimps. We've got 13 so far, and we did just get a grant countywide that, again, your chief and all the rest of the chiefs are involved in the training for what we're looking for there, so that we can not only prosecute the pimps, we are also charging the Johns, but get those people out of the life. Because when we found out that this is not only a high area of demand, but it's also a recruitment area, all of your schools, we'll be out in your schools talking to your folks about it. We've already been to Rocori and Holding Ford. And just the realization that these things are out there and they've always been there, but now we're going to do something about it, and that we actually do have some state grant help to help us pay for those resources is all good news. Questions that you have?
Father of 3 daughters, what are some things I should be looking for in trafficking?
Money and stuff that they didn't have before. How could you possibly all of a sudden have a cell phone or a track phone? Cash. What these guys will do is they will approach him as a boyfriend. It's the cool older boyfriend that everybody knows she shouldn't be hanging around with, and that's what he plays on. The idea that, hey baby, you know, we're gonna have a great life together, I'm gonna get you out of here, you're gonna be somebody, you're gonna be glamorous, you're gonna be beautiful. And once he's got her on a picture on his phone once, that's what we're finding. One of the first victims we talked to lived in Avon, is living at home, going to school, and the cop lived 6 doors away that took the interview. So the sort of things that look like, yeah, we got this bad older boyfriend, what's that all about? Runaways from the dawn of time. We do have a high-risk runaway protocol that all law enforcement is looking at now, and that's where we're getting into the schools to say, you're going to overhear things, you're going to see things. What is she doing suddenly leaving in the middle of the day? The largest demand for this kind of activity is actually over lunch hour and on the way home from work. It's not in the middle of the night that they're sneaking out. It's not on the weekends that they're disappearing. It's times when we wouldn't be paying attention, and that's actually when the highest demand is. And as soon as we put up an ad for somebody under 15, the demand triples. So yes, the older teenagers, but it's those younger ones who don't even get what's going on that are easily solicited. Good question.
On your criminal felony cases, it says persons, is that pretty much domestic assault type thing?
And burglary, if somebody breaks into your house and you're there, I consider that a person crime, not a property
Well,
crime.
I'm just curious.
Domestic abuse, no contact violations.
Yep.
I see you had quite a few here, and that means you gotta be good at the paperwork, make sure that they got proper notice up front, and then catch them when they're doing it. Burglary, sexual assault, child abuse. I'm sure you saw the priest that we charged yesterday. That's an adult victim, and we got a fair amount of questions on that of how come we don't see more of this. Adults are less likely to report. And with kids, it's mandated reporting, and sometimes it comes in from other places. But for example, that would be in that category as well.
Thanks.
One quick question, that 10-kilo bust, how much, has that been through the courts already?
No, we have at least one defendant that's still.
Okay. I guess my overall question is, what can a person get for that type of crime?
Depends on the criminal history. The marijuana levels are not as bad as the meth or the heroin or the cocaine. The heroin now we're really seeing pick up. We were fortunate that that didn't hit this county as quickly as it did some of the other counties. But on something like that, I'm guessing that's looking at about a 48-month commit. So again, depending on the criminal history, if you come in and this is the third time, then you're up in that 10-20 range. If you're coming in, it's your first felony, and marijuana is ranked lower than some of the other drugs. That's why you have to have so much of it to even catch the attention. But there were quite a few persons involved in that one. Sometimes they turn on each other, so that'll all affect it.
So as we're looking at the countywide, it to me is obviously a little bit skewed because we're talking about St. Joe, Way Park, and St. Cloud. We look at the Melrose specific one. How are we in compared to, say, a Cold Spring, Painesville, Albany, Sauk Center, on this particular individual city, taking out of the equation the St. Cloud metro area?
You are, I can tell you just in terms of the dollar amounts, you're a little beyond Rockville, you're a little beyond Avon, a little bit farther even more beyond Albany, but not Sauk Center. You're half of Sauk Center. Just in terms of pure numbers and the amount that we would be interacting with citations written. And that would be on your misdemeanors. And again, we see the felonies probably gonna be pretty close. Although I can say Sauk Center, partly you got that truck stop there. And lots, you got the Walmart there. You got a lot of activity in and out of there, but you're about half of what Sauk Center is right now.
Does anybody else have any questions?
We're happy to follow up with this information anytime. Don't wait for me to come. Things like that to help you in making budget decisions, to help in determining, how to spend your public safety dollars. It's a beautiful building. And to have the ability in a community this size to keep an eye on that. As I say, we do have a lot of contact with your police department, the sheriff's office, the state patrol, but anytime that you're looking for that kind of data, we can kick that out of our database and get you very specific answers at any time during the year if you'd like. Not a problem.
Just like I said, I watched your video with the trafficking and seeing more and more of understanding it. I hope we are educating our community, a very diverse community. I think it's pretty important for us. So.
It's been amazing, the community's reaction to it, candidly. With domestic violence, people seem to have a harder time understanding, well, why doesn't she just leave? People are getting this. And it's actually really helping in the ability to do some prevention on it because people are understanding and asking good questions. So I appreciate that you're paying attention. We can't do this without the community involved.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
All right. Thank you. Chief Mouse?
Good evening. Apologize for being out of uniform. A skiing trip today, and I didn't feel a break myself, so life is good. Monthly statistics for January 2018 in our traffic area, we had 3 citations issued, 20 verbal warnings, and written warnings. Citations are down probably by about 2/3. Very cold month in January, so not a whole lot of traffic for our officers to look at. January 2018, we had 342 calls or requests for service. Last year was 248. Those numbers a little bit higher. Some of that was related to our rental inspections. We had a large amount of those that we did so far, and February will be the ending of those, which is probably about another 30 or 40 that we did. So we roughly average about 100 each year, and they're broken up over 3 years. So about 300 rental licenses that are out there for the city. 24 agency assists, that's a pretty consistent number. Some things within the police department that we've been working on through January. Belgrade City Council approved the contract down there that was originally talked about in November with our department, with our city council, for our secretary Felicia to do their records and their dictations, those sorts of things. They gave us some numbers for January of this year already, and they're at about 100 calls for the month, which is, it'll take her maybe an hour a week to work on their stuff. We do have up to 5 hours a week is what they're comfortable with in the range for, so very easy for Felicia to keep up with those sorts of things. We do have a few trainings coming up for the department. One of them being with League of Minnesota Cities, and in critical incidents, First Amendment things, social media things with public employees and their private life. Some information on that, so it'll be interesting to see how that pans out. As well as a FirstNet training. FirstNet is something that's being designed for public safety to have dedicated cellular service, dedicated radio service in the event of a huge disaster. 9/11, cell phones that work, everybody's calling everybody. Towers overload, you got nothing. They want to dedicate a separate service, basically, through somebody, so that public safety can talk, police, fire, and ambulance. Chief Tom Buddy said that he won't be able to make it. It's a half-day training up in Alexandria, so I'll go up there and I'll brief the fire department and the ambulance crew on what's going on with that and find out how far down the road that is or anything else that's happening with that, so.
Okay.
Any questions?
I just have a question on our parking ordinance. I understand, you know, we have rules and regulations to follow as far as the 24-hour parking law on the books. Do we have the ability to say no harm, no foul on parking issues? Do you have that, or do you have to specifically enforce the law by the word of law?
Yes and no. 24-hour parking being one of those areas of concern. As with our downtown parking, when we have a 3-hour ordinance for the daytime parking.
Sure.
Parking is on the bottom end of the things that we do. If we have the time for it, we focus on it. If we don't have the time for it, it does get pushed to the wayside. Snowfalls are a bigger concern for us. Our plow trucks have to go around them. Hopefully that vehicle moves, they have the chance to come back and clean up that road. Otherwise it freezes there, becomes a big old lump in the road, those sorts of things. So it can be something that's focused on more frequently, or it can be something that gets pushed to the wayside depending on what the officers are doing during that stretch of time.
So my question is, if there's no harm, no foul, can you follow that procedure? I mean, if there's no snow emergency or anything like that on the streets, and it's a residential street and someone parks on the road and they don't move the car for 3 days, if it's not bothering anybody, if it's not impeding on the plowing of snow, do you have to enforce the law?
Shorter periods of time, like 3 days, isn't as big of a deal.
Right.
But we do have vehicles that they don't have room in their yard, their driveway, their whatever else, and that becomes their designated parking spot.
Sure.
And not all of them are then operational, not all of them are then used consistently enough because you have to walk all the way down to the street to use that car instead of the 3 that are in the driveway, so. Yeah, there's some leeway there, yes and no, but at the same time, there is some work that can be done in it as well.
Could it be possible that in cases where there is a car that's parked on the street, you know, maybe the first incident, I understand, is a warning. Would there be such a thing as just making a courtesy call to the people and saying, your car is on the street, we have a 24-hour parking thing, would you please park it in the proper spot? Could we do that courtesy to the residents of the city?
It'd be a different practice than what we're used to, but we could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just thinking maybe the dispatcher down there could make a phone call.
But I think that would be better than finding shades of gray within the ordinance. I mean, I'd rather change the ordinance then. If we have the ordinance, let's enforce it. If we don't, then let's change it so that, you know, it's 24-hour parking after snowfall, or 1 inch of snowfall, or something of that nature, so that there isn't that perception of, well, you picked on him, but not on me, you know, type of thing. So I don't want to get you guys in the sticky wicket. To change the ordinance would be something that would be, I think, more palatable, or changing the practice of saying, okay, well, let's reach out and make sure that we make contact before
Right.
there's 3 warnings and a tow truck comes and whatever happens. I don't know what.
And
my
we
assumption.
did have that conversation this week about, you know, let's do our due diligence and go to the door, knock on the door, said, hey, it's been 3 days. At least, I think that would be a fair,
I think it's just courtesy to the people of this community, you know. We don't live in a metropolis where we gotta.
Do you feel people know the ordinance?
That was one of the questions of, we had 2 tows this week related to 24-hour parking, so it's a written warning, 3 administrative citations. On the 3rd one, the vehicle can be towed. And that's what happened with 2 of them this week. One person did say, I had no clue this ordinance exists, and I was in on the conversation with City Administrator Mike Breathhorst, and there's plenty of ordinances that we're probably not aware of, you know, the simple things, setbacks on fences and those sorts of things that people within the city government are privy to, but not the general public. So it's difficult to, we can maybe post them more often through our Facebook page, through the Beacon or something similar to that, get them out there. It's still a matter of how many times you put it in someone's face before it becomes something they're concerned about. But I did agree when I talked with one of the people this week that, after the second citation, before that tow happens, we'll make at least an attempt. But I did put the responsibility back on them as well. If you haven't touched or moved your car in 6 days, how much would you expect to occur or come out of any of this?
And I would say too, I'm not talking about the repeat offender. I'm just talking about, just call them. Just give them the courtesy of calling. I think they would respect you more for that than the way the thing ended up being. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think we did come to that conclusion this week that would be something we can work on.
Yep.
I think that would be, a fair alternative for the people, at least then they know.
So just for the record, then, we have 24-hour parking. What are the months?
All 12 months of the year.
12 months of the year.
It's more of a focus in the winter because of the plowing situation. This last situation, there was snow on the vehicle, so showing it hadn't moved for those periods of time. There was no snow plow in the residential area because it was light enough that the street crew didn't want to plow on the weekend, and by the Monday following, it wasn't necessary.
So that's throughout town, and then there's a different parking ordinance downtown.
Downtown, Monday through Saturday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., 3 hours at a time.
Maybe we should publish it in the Beacon one more time, just to make sure it's clarified, so
I can shoot you a copy of the ordinance.
everybody knows about it.
Mhm.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Scott Demick,
Yes,
will you grace us with some of your time?
sure. Got my report, and you can see we got, zoning, economic development, these are all what's shaping up, that we'll have some activity this coming year once the weather breaks. Those questions are, all associated with development. And so we've got a couple of things going. You'll see the Melrose one stop, that was actually wrapping up. That was that deferred loan program we had, and they finally got their paperwork in and we finished that up. We did have an inquiry about moving a manufactured home onto a residential lot instead of building a lot. And, by state law, it's permitted, but the manufactured home has to meet the same requirements we put on a stick-built home. And so that kind of is the question is, can this manufactured home meet the requirements? The requirements are the same for any building that is gonna be a residence. Don't know how it turned out, gave me information, decided maybe it was more work. And then we're still following up on trying to pick up that property adjacent to the park. We've been working with the owner's mortgage company, getting a partial release out of one of these national vendors. It takes like an act of Congress, so they completely lost their minds on this process. It's not the first time I've run into this, but it's almost simpler to have the person go out and refinance and get a different loan than get a partial release. We'll work through it.
Not there yet.
Any questions on that? Otherwise, I'll sit down.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thanks. All right, on to action items, since we can't do the public hearing for another 5 minutes, we're just gonna skip A, B, C, and D for right now and come back to them. So 7E, police officer hire full-time. Greg?
Yes, so that's to see where Officer Stephanie Robach put in her letter of resignation. She will be finishing February 20th, will be her last shift at the city. She'll be moving on to Morrison County as a deputy full-time. We are looking to replace her position. Unfortunately, we only had her for probably 9-10 weeks, give or take. She was a part-time officer prior to that, so we had all that training out of the way, so we did have 9 or 10 weeks of work, but we are back in the hole again, another officer. So we're looking for the council approval to hire back that position.
And Craig, you wanted to do an external posting?
Right, I did speak with our part-time officers. Currently, we have 2. One of them did not respond back, the other one is interested. So I don't know that an internal posting with one candidate is necessarily viable. So I did say an external posting is probably recommended. And if our current part-time officer scored well enough and everything else like that, good possibility that things could work out that way.
Okay.
Can you speak a little bit, Craig, of, it seems like, maybe it's just perception, that we have been going through a high rate of turnover here lately? Is that true, or just seems that way, or how do we compare here right now to?
Yes and no. We're back to the situation where Chief John Jensen was in the early part of my career, so from 97 to 2007 or so. I think he hired 22 officers in that time. The availability of jobs is, if you want a job, you can find one. When we went into the economic downturn, obviously, city governments, county governments weren't hiring, they weren't replacing positions, those sorts of things. So people were here for 6, 7, 8 years, which was a huge bonus for our department. We had some stability again. We may turn into a training ground again. I don't know if we can throw enough money at people to keep them around where they can't afford to leave anymore, or if we're training them well enough to do and expect them to do the job that we want them to do for our city, but then also we make them attractive for other departments. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. Like I said, we train them well enough that they can do what we need them to do, but unfortunately another department looks at that and says that's very nice. And a lot of it comes down to, where do you want to work? I wanted to come back home and work here. Officer Nekanicki has been around here for 10 years, but maybe at some point he says, you know what, it'd be nice to be back home by mom and dad. You know, so that's a situation to consider as well. If you can move to the region where you like to live and work, there's that possibility to walk away from a department our size.
And I do remember, like you said, back in the late 90s and early 2000s, there was a large amount of turnover. We ended up with a lot of candidates right out of school, and the culture definitely was affected by that.
Mm-hmm.
Is Officer McDonald coming back?
He is back. He's been, February 1, he was back on the
Oh,
schedule.
yeah. Oh, okay.
He's got a solid, what are we at?
I didn't see
15?
it
He's probably
back
got about 8 shifts under his belt already for the month. So.
All right.
And a nice suntan.
Yeah.
It faded fast.
Very
Yeah,
good.
so we are back to a 4-officer schedule, which, well, the 4-officer schedule will start after Officer Robach does leave. So we have that ability to work within that schedule, thankfully. There's some vacations we'll get creative with the scheduling, but we're able to work under that structure at least. But the 5th officer, when we were able to use it, it was very nice not to have to call part-time and whatever else and adjust people.
That's good to hear. Good to hear.
You wouldn't want to go back to the sheriff, county sheriff thing again? Rather not?
The sheriff's department, speaking for the deputies, they would not like to do that. The
Okay.
administration may not have any issue with that
Okay.
on the sheriff's department side.
Okay, just throw it out there.
Mhm.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions or concerns? Okay, can I get a motion to approve, please?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Just turned 6 o'clock, so we'll go back to the public hearing. It is 6 o'clock. Public hearing on proposed application for community development block grant funding.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Ed Zimney with Central Minnesota Housing Partnership.
1 second. Can I get a motion to open this?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. I'm sorry.
And then, Mr. Mayor, for the official record, here's a copy of the public hearing notice as presented to our city clerk.
All right. Thank you. All right.
As I mentioned, I'm from Central Minnesota Housing Partnership to work with the city here on the grant application for the Small Cities Program. We've done all the, kind of the background research and established the target areas in the community. And basically, the public hearing is required to give the citizens an opportunity to ask questions about the grant application and how the program works. I believe you do have some of the information in your packet there. Basically, we'd be looking at applying for rehabbing 8 residential projects and 4 commercial projects. I believe the city has done a few of these in the past, at least with the residential, and so there's probably some, background in that. It's been very successful, from my understanding, at Stearns County HRA administered those. But kind of the highlights for the program, proposing $21,000 per household on the maximum for the loan. It's a deferred loan, so it's 0% interest, 7-year term on the loan. They don't have to pay it back, and as long as they stay in the house for 7 years, the loan is forgiven. The commercial is a little bit different, but it has some of the same items as far as there's a deferred portion to that loan, and then there's a 1% interest loan. It's broken down into 80% 0% interest, and 20% is a 1% interest loan. It's a 10-year installment, so the payments are relatively low. And then the owner, or the commercial projects, the owner is actually responsible for paying a portion of that out of pocket as well. So the small cities covers 80% of the project, the owner covers 20%. Both of these require a little historic background check on the properties, and that's done by the State Historical Society. We need to get those approvals before we kind of work with the owners to get their contracts and have it bid out. We work with the owners to help them decide which contractors to go with. We draw up the contracts and the loan documents. We basically handle all the administration portion of that. The administration fee is based on the grant application, so our administration fees come out of the grant application. There's no cost to the city. Basic timeline for this is the grant application is due February 22nd. We usually find out in May or early June if the grant has been awarded. If it has, there's a couple-month period where we do the environmental review. We'd be looking at holding kickoff meetings, informational meetings in September, October of this year yet to try to get these clients and projects started. So.
Ed, can you talk a little bit about the other communities that you've worked with in regards to the responses compared to Melrose?
Sure. Right now we've got 3 active grants. There's one in Big Lake, one for Mille Lacs County, which is doing the smaller communities of Isle and Waukon. We have one in Howard Lake, which is just a commercial project only. Finished up 2 in Moose Lake and Browerville. Those were combination residential commercials. The attendance that we received at the informational meeting was very good. That was January 22nd, I believe. We had roughly 8 to 10 homeowners and a couple of commercial property owners that were interested. And so anytime we can get that kind of input up front, it helps with the grant application as we push it forward. The better response we have from the community, the better chance it is of getting awarded. And then, of course, you have a better chance of having a successful grant if you've got those people interested up front. And I think Melrose had a very good turnout for that informational meeting.
So can you just give an example, like, of what they're looking for? Just if, someone,
As far as like
if they need new,
project?
yes, what
Sure,
kind of work?
Sure. Residential, we're looking at roofing, windows, siding, kind of the big 3 exterior features of the house. There's also insulation work, furnace replacement, water heater replacement, any type of accessibility improvements. And then, of course, there's health and safety issues. So if the home's built prior to 1978, there's lead paint risk assessment that needs to be done. If there's lead paint risk hazards in the home, those would have to be addressed. So it's a pretty good overall of the structure. On commercial, it's more focused to the exterior of the building, unless there's maybe structural issues or code violations that need to be addressed, then funding can be used on that. So on commercial projects, we'd be looking at tuck pointing, windows, doors, accessibility improvements, and even things like signage, so advertising, awnings, those type of things, so.
Ed, what is not a good candidate for repairs in a residential property?
Things like cabinets, carpeting, like a kitchen remodel, if you keep in mind it's a rehab program and not a remodel program, so we can't do an addition or a basement remodel or finish, those types of things.
I've seen that in the past where people say, well, I can get new cabinets here. It's like, well, no, that's not really the point of the program. So that's,
Correct.
just wanted to draw that to attention.
You bet.
Is there a dollar value on the commercial part of it?
Yeah, good thing you brought that up, because I think our handout had a little bit off there. The maximum amount for a commercial project, the funding is $40,000. We had in here 30, because when we're applying for that grant, we're averaging the projects out at about 30,000 apiece. And that's not to say that if the first 4 projects only use 25,000, there's funding left, we can try to get that 5th project completed, so.
Anybody have any questions?
All right.
Answered all my questions. All right.
I don't know if the audience, if there's any.
Public
Yeah,
hearing,
it-
yes.
Yeah, it's in, does anybody in the audience have questions? Students, anybody?
Could that be used for museum update, windows?
If it's a government-owned building, no.
Are you government?
I would just comment,
If it's
you know,
leased
as the police department goes through and does the inspections, you know, the items that we brought to you are the easy ones. You know, someone's got a mess in their yard and hasn't cleaned it up, and that's pretty easy for us to then say, ask you guys to issue an order saying, you know, either you clean it up or we'll clean it up and pass the bill along to you. But we are seeing a number of situations where the violation is problems with the siding, problem with the windows, problem with the roof. And that's a little bit harder. What are we gonna order them to do if they don't have the money? Assuming the city doesn't wanna get into the business of, you know, saying, well, if you don't paint, fix your siding, we'll fix your siding and assess you for it. So having a carrot to balance the stick, I think would be helpful, you know, with our overall program of trying to keep the city up.
Now, with some of our people that we have, are some of these people that we should contact that we have issues with, or are you just gonna concentrate on that little area, that area?
Well, for the grant, we are kind of restricted to the target area.
Okay.
Correct, but that's part of the application itself is the target area. Certainly, though, those households are located in the target area, you know, would be an encouragement to get them to apply if the grant is approved.
Yeah, it might be a good thing, and we'd probably have files to know if any of our people are in that area too, right? So, might be something we can hand over, so, okay. All right.
It's a 7-year grant for the residential, and if they move out of the residence before the 7 years, they pay the loan back?
They pay a balance of it, and
Balance,
it's
yep.
deferred, but it's prorated, so 1/7 is forgiven
Sure.
each year.
Okay, yep,
Yep.
yep, okay.
All right, we're good.
All right,
Thank you. We'll take action in a little bit here. So then it is 6:10, and we'll close this. A motion to close it?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
All right.
Opposed, motion carried. All right, then we'll go to action items. Resolution number 2018-9, declaring slum and brightened area. So, who wants to?
There's a map attached to your agenda. which outlined the target areas, direct mailings were made, efforts were not actually, physical survey was made, and doors were knocked down as well, this to get people to participate or to apply. So that's what you're doing now, is you're adopting the specific area.
Okay.
The language slum and blighted is specific for this resolution, for this grant, for this purpose only. It's not for anything else whatsoever.
That's correct. It has nothing, so for example, if there was a future tax increment district for redevelopment of a residential zone or some type of abatement district, it has no impact to that.
Okay. All right, can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Communication plan.
This is the plan where we're gonna talk about how we speak to our applicants. Primarily, this will be done through the public hearing process that we just did, the direct mailing, the public informational meetings that we had. And so this just formally adopts how we are going to communicate, email and communication. And Ed's gonna be the primary driver for all of this, but we still have to adopt the plan.
So the motion is to adopt citizen participation plan. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Can I get a second? Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Resolution number 2018-10, resolution authorizing submitting small cities development program application.
Yeah, this is just saying that we can go ahead and apply and authorize Ed to submit on our behalf.
So, okay.
Cost to this, no cost to this grant writing?
Correct. You paid our administrative service already, and so this application is being sent in from that payment.
Okay. So can I get a motion move it forward?
So move.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. And then resolution number 2018-11, resolution pledging remaining previous CDBG grant funds to Small Cities Development Program Rehabilitation Grant.
Yeah, this really helps us with our receiving points for the grant application. We had a community development block grant that we did back in the early 2000s. And with that, people, and Dick asked the question, Councilman Christensen asked the question, what happens to the funds? So after, say, 3 years, they sell the house, well, those funds get put back into a pool, and then at a future time, like now, we can then use those funds to help as a local match. So, and that's nearly 30,000, was it 29? Yeah, $29,352. Stearns County HRA currently administers those funds for us. They will now transfer that back into the city coffers, so then we can then administer the funds.
All right, can I get a motion to approve that, please?
So move.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. We are down to 7F, 2018-2019 League of Minnesota Cities Workmen's Compensation Insurance Quote. Is Tessa, you or Mike talking on that?
We just received our quote for the upcoming year. We go March to March for our workers' compensation. Unfortunately, there was another increase this year. Our premium quote is $105,087. Just for reference, last year's was $81,229. Our experience modification increased to 1.26%, up from 1.06. When we have a claim, it stays on our record for 3 years. About 3 years ago now, we had a large claim, and now we have one other one. So I'm anticipating that next year, the first one will have fallen off. Hopefully we don't have any more, but it could stay higher for the next couple of years.
All right.
I know, I think we asked this every year. Have we gotten quotes in the past from anybody else? or
Last year, we
nobody else?
reached out to find if there were other agencies that provide this to municipalities, and there really weren't.
much.
I had our agent look out.
So
For
they
the
give
number of
business a
cities
start.
through the
You don't wanna
state,
get
I
with
think
business.
primarily they go through the
Thanks.
risk pool. So I think that sometimes shelters us, and other times, we take on other usage. But we did look into it for both workers' comp and our property and liability insurance to see if there were other places that we could
Tony asked the same question last year. I'm gonna ask the same question I asked last year. Our mod rate at 126 is ridiculously high. And obviously you stated that we had a few accidents. What are we doing from a safety and training standpoint? Whether somebody cuts their hand, do we do a safety program that says, all right, let's start wearing gloves? Let's work out the problem, or whatever. Of course, that's a poor example, but something along those lines as far as our safety program goes, to get that mod rate back under 1.
We do have a safety program that all employees participate in. We have monthly safety meetings as well as a safety committee that reviews it. The claim in question is still kind of being debated, I guess you could say.
It's in court right now.
In some of those instances, I don't know that certain protocols in place would have prevented it for those. For slips, trips, and falls, for chemicals, for all of those things, we do have monthly safety meetings to address that.
Yeah, just looking at, any company that does it, there's an accident, then let's review what could have been prevented, what could have done it. If it's a burn or a chemical burn, why aren't we wearing rubber gloves? Or, if it's a slip, why aren't we, whatever the example is. I'm hoping we're doing those processes, because 126 is high.
So what kind of, what is the motion gonna be made for this, just to accept it?
Yes, please.
And the city share of this, again, this would be split with utilities as well. So the city share would be $72,656 for the year.
All right, can I get a, go ahead.
One quick question. So the case in question that's being debated or argued. Litigated, thank you. Let's say that it comes in favor of the city. Is there a renegotiation period that we'd say, okay, well, our mod rate now is down because this is not a true claim?
That, I'm not sure how that would be settled. We had one case that was litigated a couple years ago, and that did not go in our favor, so the modification stood. I guess if this would turn around, I'm not sure.
The league has a practice of reimbursing if there's additional savings throughout the fiscal or calendar year since modifications. The league does that for all of its members, for general liability, as well as for workers' comp. Workers' comp is really hard, as you know, but yes, that's what would happen.
That'd be my assumption also, but getting that in email would be, if we could just shoot email and say, yep, it will be modified if
we can get it.
if you are successful.
We'll get that answer for you by next council.
Sounds good. Or just don't.
All right,
Great.
can I get a motion to approve, please?
So move.
Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. All right, master pathway plan.
Yeah, this is exciting. Actually, we have a representative here from the county to discuss this as well, but basically what this is there's funding out there to help the city of Melrose, as well as the Melrose School District, develop a master trails and park and pathways plan. The city does have a comp plan in place right now for trails and pathways. However, this is a tool that would allow us for a specific plan to allow us to potentially capitalize on state appropriations through Safe Routes to Schools, capital grants, through other programs through the state. This plan would allow us to reach a lot of those criterias. We've had a staff meeting to talk about this twice now. I have a verbal commitment from the school district to fund up to $1,500 of our local match. I got off the phone today with the Initiative Foundation, and they are strongly encouraging us to apply for up to a $4,000 local participation, which would go towards the total cost for this, but that's still contingent upon a full application. But based upon our partnership and how we're talking about community involvement and forming committees to talk about trails and parks and pathways, that we would be able to have a really good chance at receiving that $4,000 grant, or the minimum $2,500 grant for that. Did I miss anything?
And so I think the other piece to take note of is that not only will this be to build infrastructure for sidewalks and pathways, but also to look at your on-street facilities, so improvement crosswalks. If there's a potential low-use road or street that you could add just by striping something on the street to make it safer for a bicyclist or pedestrian. So really looking at a bunch of ways that we can improve biking and walking in the city of Melrose, low cost or no cost, obviously better than infrastructure. So once you have this plan, then you can use your plan to apply for dollars, like you just mentioned. There's TA funds that come for the region, as well as multiple other funds that you can use to apply for specific infrastructure. In addition to that, then there'll also be strategies that will be laid out on ways to encourage more people to walk and bike, not only for recreation, but for transportation. We know that in a lot of our rural cities, a lot of people don't have cars or don't have the ability to drive, so how can we make it more safe for them to walk or bike to destinations that they would like to? Myself, through Stearns County Public Health, as well as Hannah Docador with Center Care Health Blend, we would lead the community engagement piece of this project. So we would collect feedback from residents through community surveys, attending events, doing some mapping, so really building up that support from the community as well to help establish the plan.
In this plan, the city of Albany went through this. They've had success with this process. We have solicited a quote from WSB. WSB has worked with SHIP as well as Blend to really get the price down to what is reasonable, because Blend and SHIP are going to be doing most of the communication with the public, and that's where most of the money comes from. So what we're looking for from the council is that you would pledge up to 50%, I think it was like $3,000 I put down there, as a show of good faith to the school district, as a show of good faith to the Initiative Foundation, that we are committed to funding this program. So, and then if we were awarded these programs, then we would then move forward at next meeting to formally adopt that we would go through the plan. Does that make sense?
It's probably just the difference of buckets of money, but doesn't the Parks and Rec have authorization to spend up to $5,000 for sidewalks and things of that nature without council approval?
Right, but this was a formal plan, developing a plan, so that's why we brought it before the council, and because of the timeline. And you can direct that the funds come out of the Parks Fund, and that's perfectly fine, and that's a legitimate expense too.
Has the Parks Board taken a look at this?
No, we haven't had a Parks Board meeting.
The only reason I say that is obviously they have their own ideas, and I know boards can get kind of not offended, but
Territorial?
if they don't get to look at something first, then and
What's the timeline?
What's the timeline? It's like,
So the plan would have to be completed by the end of September, paid an invoice. Stearns County Public Health right now, through a grant that we have through the state of Minnesota, has up to $10,000 to put towards the plan, but our dollars have to be spent and invoiced back to the county by the end of September.
so what we could do is I could call a special Parks Board meeting before our next council meeting to ask them what their input is, and say that the council would consent or supports their further review of this, or.
I guess I'd like them to look at it.
It would probably wouldn't hurt. I guess there's two ways you can look at it. Is it good to have a plan in place? Probably. But on the flip side, if you have this plan in place, you feel obligated to do it. And at some point, there's going to be some funding needed to, I know we hear it's going to be all grant funded, but there will be times when we have a 50% match opportunity to install one of the trails that is part of this master plan. And then we don't fund it, and well, we got this plan in here, we're supposed to be doing this stuff. Why aren't we doing it? I don't know how anybody else feels, but I think we got a lot of sidewalks, a lot of pathways in town already that we have to maintain. Once these are all installed, they need to be maintained also. Maintaining infrastructure is not very cheap, especially when it's optional infrastructure. We struggle quite a bit with roads and maintaining those already, so we have a fairly elaborate trail system. I know we have some other ideas where we would like to put trails already, but you're going to get two other agencies involved in a plan like this, and takes a little bit of decision.
Can it be
ability
as
with
simple
us
as,
also.
I mean, like I said, there is already an informal plan in place on the 10-year CapEx plan. Isn't it just a matter of taking what we have and applying it into this module?
It really is. I mean, that's what, well, no, I shouldn't say that. It's a little bit more complicated than that because this is a community input you're asking for. Because the deal is that when this grant is written or the plan is put together, it's designed in such a way that it meets the criteria for the majority of the Safe Roads to Schools capital funding. And it also then solicits comments, like, for example, one of the things that we came up with our initial discussions is that, well, we can simply, very easily paint bicycles along Craft Drive here in the median, so, which was there before, but we just stopped doing it because, you know, it cost us about $400 to do that a year. So we stopped doing it a couple of years ago. So those are just some ideas that would come out of this.
Justin, you went to that meeting for this, correct?
Mm-hmm.
What was your feedback?
I don't know, I mean, I think it's a good idea if we wanna put more sidewalks in town for other areas to be able to get them to, you know, help get some funding on it, because otherwise you probably won't get the funding on it. But I definitely think probably go in front of the park board. I mean, it's kind of their,
Oh, it is, yeah.
that part of that deal, so.
Yeah, and maybe stress the influence the other two agencies would have also.
And I don't
See if
know
you
how
want to
is,
keep it in-house or not.
how has the school been?
My conversation with Greg Winters, the school superintendent, is that he's gonna bring this before the school board here next week, I believe it is. And he believes that the school board will be willing to participate up to that $1,500 mark at this time. And then, because historically, the school hasn't participated in these discussions. And they're willing to do that now under his leadership, and according to what the school board is also interested in supporting as well, So what I would ask then, based upon what I'm hearing, is that one is you would authorize, ask the Parks Board to consider this, but if the council could, you know, endorse in concept the application, if we do get that far, because I'm gonna have to wait another month to submit another for the Initiative Foundation grants and stuff like that, it would, to maximize that funding source, that's what we need to do. You're not committing to it, you're just agreeing to apply for the funds at this time. So next month is when you would be saying, yep, we're gonna move forward, we're gonna award this contract and do that. Does that make sense?
It does. I still have reservations about creating a formal plan. When, it wasn't too long ago, we decided to go away from sidewalks because of, it's green, more green, not to have curb and gutter. They have to be maintained, and it seems like the city we just tend to pick up whatever doesn't get maintained. And how many miles of sidewalk are we clearing in the winter now?
Right now, about 4 miles.
Well, 4 miles. Yeah. After snowfall, every snowfall, we're cleaning 4 miles of trails in the city,
Can I add
right?
one thing? So by creating this plan, it's not gonna say that we're gonna create sidewalks and trails on every street in the city of Melrose.
Right.
It's going to create a network of trails. So if you live in this neighborhood, you have at least one safe network to get you out of that neighborhood to downtown. Or you have one safe network to connect you over 94, or a safe route to get you to the school district from your neighborhood. So it's gonna take those key routes and create a safe pathway on that route, but on a residential street, typically you wouldn't put anything.
Yeah, they're not talking go down every block
Right.
with
Well,
sidewalk.
yeah, and I understand that. I'm just saying that there's, like, to be more sidewalks.
The other-
Need to be maintained. Need to
The
be
other
maintained.
part that we should be aware of are, anyways, by going out and physically doing the survey and asking, well, where do you want a sidewalk? And then if we don't, because we have finite funds to build these sidewalks, and if we don't act on that, do we create hard feelings that way?
I'm just trying to look for possibilities for people too. I mean, yeah, we can't fund everything, but if we can look, what is the best possible? You know, look at like Daylight Court. I mean, you got a very busy road and very steep ditches there. That's just, you know.
We've looked at that, right?
Yeah.
Sidewalk to school out the back, between those
Yeah,
two lots.
when we did it, you know, that was sort of a agreement with the school, but then they decided to put up a, I don't know, looks like a border fence through that whole complex there, so now that's impossible to do. So I think just give some options.
Well, at this point, should we just have the Parks and Rec take a look at it and then deal with it?
Would you allow allow staff to submit a grant application to the Initiative Foundation? Again, you don't have to accept it if we're awarded it, but at least it would give us the ability to apply for it and see if it's awarded. And we can always turn it down if it comes in.
No money, no money involved with that?
Just my time.
Just time.
Or actually the time, hopefully, of the new community development director, we'll see. No, I'll get this thing written up here. So your call.
On the Parks Board.
I don't know. I'll also move at least applying for the grant. I'm not saying that we have to use it.
Got it first. And I will make a second for that. So there's a first and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Okay, they'll bring this before the council at the next meeting. We should have hopefully a lot more clarity by then.
All right, we're on the old business, Historical Society lease agreement.
This is a 19 and a half years in the coming, right? This agreement has, the city received the Melrose Historical Society. It's facilities about 20 years ago. The contract is up for renewal as the 20 years it will be expiring. We worked with Scott Demick to look at the facilities in regards to the cost to do this, and also looked at the language. And Scott updated the language to adjust some of the current legal requirements. We looked into the cost for the actual city to do this facility each year. I have it handy. The city pays roughly $358 a year in insurance. The building is valued at $328,956. The Historical Society maintains the facility, and they pay for all other costs throughout for the building, repairs, maintenance. So, and I'll turn it over to Roger if he has any other questions.
I guess I'm here to field questions, and my board member, Steve Borgen, is there to back me up or tell me what to say. Fire away.
Are you looking at doing any, fundraisers this summer? I know you had one, there were a few years ago where you, had like book signer there, and I think you did a reenactment or something.
Basically, what you say with a book signer or reenactment, that's all for publicity. It's not a fundraiser at all. Just so you know that we're in the community. We did put a new roof on 2 years ago, and that's about $11,000, and we're kind of flying by the seat of our pants now financially. We do have 2 CDs in our checking account. We only have $4,000. That's all we have. It's not much at all. I've got more than that in the bank myself. For projects that we're doing, we are upgrading our lighting, so to speak. The lighting is quite bad inside. And we got a grant for that, a legacy grant. It came in 2 phases. One phase has already been done. They have assessed that, and it's basically automatic that we will get the second grant that we're gonna apply for. And if we do get it, which I said is most likely, that won't be approved until this Thanksgiving. So it's gonna be a while in doing this. We've already let the bids for this, and they've been accepted. But, so it's a while, but that would be about $36,000. So there's a lot of money involved for what we're doing. We're trying to improve the building. And I asked about windows before to this gentleman. And that will probably be our next project. We probably will have to, we're not replacing, but we will have to cover up. We don't need all of those windows. I mean, light is bad for your artifacts. And so we probably would be covering about 40 of those, and you say, oh, that's a lot of windows, but if you look in the back of the building, some of those are in, well, they're just small windows, there's a whole string of them, that's about 10 of them right there. And the upstairs windows, upstairs is mostly for storage, so we wouldn't need a lot of windows there, one in each room. See, so there's a lot of windows, and they're big and they take a lot of heat, and we're not open in the wintertime, so we don't heat it very much. It's 53 degrees in there all winter. Questions? We do serve an important part of the community, I think. We're all voluntary, nobody gets paid. I spend a lot of time over there, as do some other people. It's like Oak Hill Cemetery, I get paid $2 an hour, that's my, so if I go, what's gonna happen, you know? We need a lot of people, we need volunteers, our staff over there. I anticipate in the next 3 years, we'll have a turnover of about 5 people. Most of the people over there are 85 years old. I'm the youngest one on the staff, and I'm pushing 80, so we need people, we need volunteers. Carol, put that in the paper. So questions, fire away.
The seat of our pants comment has me a little worried. Obviously, this is a asset or a liability, whichever you want to say, for the city. And you have a maintenance program that, you know, obviously you've got a roof that you just replaced. You talk about windows. You know, the heating plant, do we have any idea what kind of condition that's in? Or do you look at a CapEx program to say, you know what, we know that we're gonna have to replace this thing in 3 years? The reason I bring it up is that you guys are in charge of all the maintenance, and it becomes what happens if the boiler goes down, pipes freeze, and now we have a building that is devaluing.
We do apply for grants for certain things, like we would with the windows. We wouldn't do anything with the windows without a grant. We have gotten along very well. We apply for local establishments to donate money if we can. We just recently digitized all of the beacons, and that was a couple of years ago, and we applied for that. We just asked through the community, and it didn't cost us anything. And a lot of people didn't think we would do that on our board, that we would get any of the funds. It just came out of the blue. And that's how we would have to do this. We would either have to apply for funds or apply for grants to fix things up. The furnaces, we have we have 4 furnaces. Those were established or bought in the year 2000 when we opened up. So they're all in good shape. We do have maintenance on a couple of those every year. There's a burner that burns out or something like that happens. So there is constant maintenance on that and costs. I don't anticipate many costs, but like I said, you don't know what's going to happen or when it's going to happen. We have been getting along with no problems. I say no problems, and we anticipate that we will continue doing so.
You made a comment about the windows, and I told you I'd bring this up tonight too, is the repair of those windows. And is that something the council or the facilities is comfortable with, is not replacing those windows and having those sealed up? I think that's a legitimate question for the council members. I've had a couple of conversations about that, and should that be a priority? Should that maintaining the value of the facility and so on?
I would agree that UV is bad for the memorabilia you have and artifacts.
Okay.
So,
From an operations standpoint, but it also devalues the building.
Potentially, right. What type of, how would you close up the, would it be a
If you look at
wood or
the
would it be?
Freeport School, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
They closed up a lot of windows there, and it's a kind of a beige thing. I don't know what you call it. I never looked into it because that's too far down the road for us. I'm thinking another 3 years or more. But I suggest using that type of thing. And it would be fairly, not too costworthy to do per window, because I have a couple of, let's say, carpenters in mind and a plan to do that, and it was fairly cheap.
what I'm curious is the windows now are, there's some pretty high efficiency windows out there that.
Yeah.
That,
But we don't need all the windows, therefore we don't need the high efficiency. If we're gonna replace some
Right.
windows that we really need, then that's a cost.
right.
grandson works for Marvin Windows, and I talked to him about this, and he said, oh, yep, it's way up there. It would cost you a few bucks. So-
Scott, in the lease itself, obviously, it says that the Historical Society is to do the maintenance and whatnot. This wouldn't be, in my mind, considered maintenance, this is renovation. You're changing the
The windows would be
aesthetics,
renovation,
right.
yeah.
So in the lease itself, is there anything that would come back for city approval, since they are changing the aesthetics of the building?
We are supposed to have city approval for any changes that we make, construction-wise, structurally.
And one of the things it talks about, I'm looking at number 5, it said, the paragraph is from the second page, paragraph number 5, it says repairs, but it talks about repairs and improvements. And it says prior to making repairs, the society submits to Melrose construction plans, detailed cost estimates, evidence that they've got the funds, and then it's all subject to the council.
I don't have a problem with what we're here tonight for is the lease. I think that's what we're
Mhm.
discussing.
For how long? Is this a 20-year lease?
20 years. You'll be,
No, I won't. I
yeah,
won't
you'll be here.
We'll be back in
I
20.
won't be here, but
You'll be here.
All right,
I'll be 100.
all right. We're gonna have to.
Sounds like there's a few other things we'll be discussing in the near
Yeah.
future.
Then
but-
we'll work with you. All right. We're gonna have to start moving this meeting. Can I get a motion to approve, please?
So move.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. All right.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, yeah, swing by.
Community Development Director hire. Mike?
Yeah, Community Development Director hire, we were so fortunate. And this was probably one of the hardest hires that we've ever had to go through, because we had such outstanding applicants. Is that a true, I think?
Oh, yeah, we had a lot of good candidates.
Yeah, we had some good candidates here. We had individuals who have the title of Community Development Director, Economic Development Director, planners, in their backgrounds, Chamber of Commerce Executive Directors. So we had a number of applicants. We had it boiled down to 2 really excellent candidates. One was a little stronger in one area and one is stronger in the other area. So based upon our conversations and the group assessment, we felt that Lisa Atkinson would be the best fit for Melrose. She is a planner by trade. She holds the AICP certification. She's been a municipal planner. She's been a community development director. She took a little bit of time off for some kids, but now she's back in the industry. She's originally from Melrose, and so she has her parents still in town here. So there's a real draw to, hopefully have some longevity here for our community development director. So having said that, it's the unanimous committee's recommendation to bring Lisa on board. Her first day would be the 26th, and that she would be starting at step 2 of 7 with the standard benefit package.
Any questions or concerns, or can I get a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion.
Can I get a second, please?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
She asked me to text her as soon as they find out.
Okay.
Like, start looking.
First Street project.
Nice.
Mike, are you in charge of this one?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, am I okay sitting here for audio?
Why don't you bring that in?
Yeah, I've got a lot of papers, so it won't work very well.
Oh, yeah, got it.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we presented a 90% set of plans. We've gone through a number of iterations on the sewer design. Mike Bradhorst has made contact, I believe with every of the property owners down there, and there was not much interest in realigning the sewer. So we're going to stay with the original sewer replacement plan. The PUC has just recently re-televised the sewer. We had asked that they do that to help us identify a little bit closer to the sewer service locations. So we're moving ahead with that sewer plan. Again, the water main is going to be extended from 2nd Avenue all the way through the intersection of 4th. And eventually will connect up with the new river crossing at the bridge. Through discussions with the Public Works Department, we've changed the driveway entrance type from the curb wraparound that's currently at City Hall to more of a driveway entrance with flared aprons on it. It's a lot easier on the snow plows. The snow plow will ride up the driveway entrance instead of banging into that curb. It's both difficult on the snowplow driver, and the curb when you do that. So we've made that change. We've narrowed the sidewalks on 4th Avenue. Currently, there was a 9-foot, excuse me, and a 10-foot sidewalk. We've narrowed that to 8 feet. That'll allow us a little bit more maneuvering room with the diagonal parking on 4th Avenue. The city parking lot, we had hoped to get in some additional parking stalls back there. We met with some of the property owners, and I guess the time I put that together, I wasn't aware that there was some overhead garage parking. So we're gonna have to go back to the original plan, and we'll get a couple extra stalls in on the east side of the parking lot, but we were gonna push those further towards the building, but at this time, that won't be possible. So, Mr. Brett Horst had asked the abutting property owners in that 500 block, I guess, if they wanted to pave beyond the city parking lot, and they had all agreed to do that. So we'll be paving essentially up to the buildings.
Mike, we did have one property owner that has opted not to participate in that. However, I think once we figure out what the final costs are, it's literally a 1 foot by 25-foot swath there. So we'll work through that scenario when that gets to that. Or it's a 1.5 foot or something like that.
So a couple of questions, I guess, for some final direction from the council. If you'll turn to sheet 11, it's the street and storm sewer plan. We've got the sidewalk areas hatched. You'll see more of a cross hatch and then some lighter hatching. The cross hatching is what would be normally 4-inch concrete sidewalk. Because these sidewalks are abutting the back of the curb, and certainly all along the north side is city property, Gary has indicated that they may be driving some heavier equipment on these sidewalks, and we think it would probably be a good idea to pour these as 6-inch walks. The lighter areas in the driveways, those are always 6-inch, so it would just be the shaded areas in between the driveways that would be changed to 6-inch instead of 4-inch concrete. Throughout the entire length of the project, the additional concrete cost would be about $20,000 to do that. So looking for some direction from the council on that.
So Mike, Mike and Gary, in regards to that, that's a number that I knew would get their ears perked up here pretty quick. For repair and maintenance to the sidewalks for your bobcats or whatever that's on there, the likelihood of them wrecking the cement or having them settle, what's the likelihood of that versus, do we put money away for each year we plan to replace 2 sections of sidewalk a year for here and forever? Or what do you think?
Well, Gary, I think you probably answered that a little better than I can, I guess, as far as what equipment.
Well, I guess if we're looking at the longevity, you might be running a 30,000-pound machine on there at times, and again.
Is it realistic that it might crack?
Well, yeah.
So, I mean, that's.
I know when we did another project, that's north.
On the sidewalk.
When we went north school, we also went heavy with bituminous for that reason. It wasn't intended to use it with heavy equipment, but at that time we went heavier, and we really benefited because we're under a lot of heavier machinery. Sometimes when you get, big snow drifts and stuff, you can't get it off or anything else. And there's times, like I said, we may have to take the blower on, or we've already taken snow off the sidewalk with a plow truck. Again, it's situations where we can't control.
And so the way this design is different compared to what you've seen in the past is that we're not gonna have a grass boulevard there anymore. It's gonna be curb, sidewalk. And the reason they do that is so they can use the wing or use the equipment just to push it right off and just keep moving, right, Gary? Is that correct?
Doesn't the wing typically take care of whatever you need? I mean, you can get the wing up there, right? Since it's up against the curb, or?
Well, we have to pull it off though.
Oh.
We haul First Street, so we have to clear snow, so
To
we
remove
put
it,
the wing,
just,
we're gonna
just
push
wing
it
it off.
on the boulevard where we would have to take the front of the plow to pull it off, or the loader, a lot of times we take the loader, it's reversible, or the skid loader generally does it. It's just in instances that we're going, we're gonna end up possibly cracking a lot of that sidewalk.
Do you think it would crack, it means the ground is frozen below it, that it would flex or allow it to crack if it's, done in the winter? I can see summertime when the ground is wet and soft, but in the wintertime, the ground is froze, there should be plenty of backing for the concrete.
There's no frost in the ground yet.
Pardon?
Sometimes there's no frost in the ground. A lot of times when you get your heavier snow, the frost is in like a late fall and stuff. There's a lot of times we can't even plow gravel roads because of the frost.
Okay.
I'm guessing any savings by saying beefing up the class 5 underneath or the sand cushion underneath versus adding the extra concrete is probably nominal.
I guess with class 5, it's certainly, I think, a trade-off. You gotta excavate a little bit deeper. I mean, with the concrete, you're getting probably 4 times the strength for the same inch of excavation. It's probably about $2.50 a square foot. Excavating a little bit deeper may save a little bit of money, but I wouldn't anticipate that it's gonna be in the 50% range.
$20,000 over 20 years is $1,000 a year then.
Well, I think, we probably would look more at like a 40-year life cycle on the sidewalk.
Sidewalk?
Yeah.
$500 a year then.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
I guess, probably 6 inches then is what we're thinking.
Yep.
Okay. Then maybe if you turn to sheet 21, I can kind of show you where the property lines are behind.
Hey, Mike, before you do that, I did have when I was going door to door to talk to the residents of the commercial property owners about this. One of them specifically, Laverne, he was concerned about having a sidewalk behind his property there. His concern was that he feels that it's gonna be a hazard for the adjacent property for walkers, and that he may run into somebody there.
Did you tell him that we're concerned about the level of cleanliness of his lot?
So, so my response to him was specifically that with a sidewalk, you would have a controlled intersection in regards to where people would walk. You would also have a reinforced, heavier cement apron there as well. So those are the comments that we gave back, but I said I would share that with the council when it comes to the final sidewalk plan when it comes up, so.
Well, it's all parking lot back there anyway, right?
It is. Yeah. And the other benefit of that is it controls just the ingress egress of the parking there. And it also, with the current plan as presented, it's the B619 curbs?
618.
618 curbs versus the surmountable curbs, so it's more defining where people can go as well. It's this meets the current standards for state sidewalks. So I just wanted to share that.
Okay, if you go to sheet 21 then, a couple of things I just wanted to point out. On the lower half of that sheet shows the city parking lot. And in that, there was some question as to, excuse me, where the actual property line was back there. And you see the 2 dashed lines that are kind of diagonally through there. The bottom, or the southernmost of those 2 lines, which essentially is across the face of those buildings, is the property line. The one building actually sticks out across the property, but, so that's one of the reasons that we didn't have as much extra room to do the parking as we thought we could. So we're still gonna restripe that lot, and I think we'll get probably at least those 3 stalls on the east side of that property, parking lot put in. So the other thing I wanted to point out on this sheet is we had a utility relocation meeting, I believe it was last week. Everybody really is pretty much out of the way for the most part. We were a little bit concerned about Harvick, but they did relocate their fiber optic to the north side of the sidewalks about 3 or 4 years ago when this project was first proposed. So the electric department did ask that we put in some additional conduit. You'll see on the top sheet there's 2 crossings. There's the dash lines, and then on the bottom sheet there's what will be along in front of City Hall here. I guess we're not at City Hall, but there'll be a conduit line with 2 crossings to the main power bank by the Baker's Alley there. And eventually that will extend past the craft lot. So, and those conduits are for future installation of electric and other utilities. So the PUC will be supplying the pipe, and then the contractor just will be putting it in as part of the project. So I think that's all the updates that I have for that. Our schedules show that we'll be coming back to the next council meeting, asking for authorization to bid the project. I'd like you to consider authorizing us to bid the project tonight. I think within 2 weeks we can have the plans completed and everything, and just be out on the street a couple of weeks early. We would still award the project at the April meeting, but contractors at least would be 2 weeks ahead of the game, I guess, as far as getting their numbers together and getting a project tied up for the year. So.
The number on your dollars and cents sheet stayed still where we're at. Obviously, you talked about an additional $20,000. Does that still fall within our budget?
The actual, yeah, I updated the cost estimate in December, and I think this estimate is actually $8,000 lower than that one was in December.
Does this have the 6-inch sidewalk or the 4-inch?
That has the 4-inch, so we'd be about 12,000 more. I have carried through a 10% contingency, which is essentially 70,000. I think we can easily cut that back to 5%, so we should be under what we anticipated in December of last year. So. Oh, the other thing I wanted to mention was the storm sewer, and I passed out this colored sheet. This is it's a what do they call it, a hydrodynamic separator, and essentially it takes the storm water and separates out all the floatables, and then also the sand that comes off of the street. This, I guess, was brought up when we were doing the lake sediment study, brought up by the Lakes Association, that they thought it would be a good idea if we made some effort to try to keep the sediment out of the lake. This is not mandatory, but you know, and I guess I'll leave it up to the council whether you think it's a good idea or not. But I mean, the prices are fairly substantial.
What are you carrying for it?
Well, it's probably going to be $40,000 to $50,000. I think I've got 60 budgeted in the estimate there.
Can you bid it as an alternate?
Yeah, I think what I was planning on doing was maybe leaving it in the base bid, but in the specification saying the council may or may not award this specific item. If we take this out, we would need to replace it with a manhole, but that manhole probably would be in the $10,000 range versus the $40,000 to $60,000 range.
Well, I think it's a good idea that if we are comfortable with the 90% set, that we do get out to bid, for the spring, get out front of other projects, we'll get better pricing.
I will also reach out to the Sauk River watershed and the soil and water conservation districts. This is when you're dealing with those organizations, it's, if you have a nice-to-have thing, they will help fund that nice-to-have portion of it. So I will reach out with this specific example and with these specific cost estimates and see if there's a potential partnership there that would help bring that down a little bit.
That would be good. All right. Keep moving. All right.
So we need a motion to.
I'll make the motion to approve the 90% plans and to authorize to go out to bid upon 100% completion.
Okay.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Police officer hire.
Which one do it, the hire or the?
Part-time, I'm sorry, part-time.
All right, so the police officer part-time position, Chance Castrela is a current Sauk Center part-time officer. We are looking to share that position with them, as we've done in the past with Officer Mormon, Officer Jungles. Good partnership that we have. The benefit we have with this one is Chance is under their licensing, so therefore they're responsible for the training. We do kick in or provide training as well to help offset some of those things, but in the end, they carry the bigger financial burden, as well as then we're able to cross-train between the two cities since we do work together so often. I'm just looking for council approval to bring Chance on to the
I know,
department.
that was messed up. All right,
Part-time status.
okay. Are we gonna move this along? Can make a motion to approve, please?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. All right. Then it's a new business master subscriber agreement, resolution number 2018-12, resolution approving state of Minnesota court data services with the city of Melrose on behalf of its police department.
This is something that Felicia had reached out to me about. It is a more in-depth way of checking the court records. Right now, we are required to have at least 7 years of records on hand by state law. We are sitting at 15 to 20 years. Judy loved having her cases to go back to from many moons ago because we can say we have it, we can give it to you. It is a liability to the city to have some of that on hand, but now she's struggling to go back and find out if this case is able to be destroyed or not because of the age of the case. Some things we do have to hang on to if it isn't resolved or is a certain type of case. So this would allow her to do that. It would just basically give her a password and an agreement to be able to enter into those records.
Okay. I'm looking for a motion adopting resolution.
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Manage IT.
We have been looking quite a bit lately at our IT needs. With the increase in technology, we're relying on it more than ever. We do not have an IT person on staff. It's usually who can fix it and who can get to it. We looked at, right now we have a break fix solution, so if something breaks, we call out our IT service and they come in and fix it at that point. We're looking at managed IT service, so this would do all the monitoring of all of the computers within the city with the servers, getting the proper patches updated, all of the virus detection, and would also be able to watch and let us know ahead of time if a computer is starting to fail or if a server is starting to fail, which would have been helpful last year at this time when our server went down and we were without it for a couple months. We reached out to Arvig as well as Marco to get quotes on those. Arvig was the lower quote of the two. It's estimated to be about $1,038.90 a month to do this. As I said, they would monitor all of our computers, and then if there was an issue that something needed to be fixed, that would be a billable rate, but that would be at a reduced rate. And the cost share would be 40% general, 60% utility. This was also brought to the Utility Commission on Monday, and they
for our.
Oh, excuse me, for Arvig,
Thanks.
sorry.
I'll make a motion to concur with the PUC and enter a contract with Arvig.
I'll second that, but I got a question. This is a 5-year agreement.
Yes.
Is there a
There is a risk-free period,
6 months?
Yeah.
But if we get it 2 years into it, and we just can't, stand having Joe come up and fix it. No, I'm just kidding. But, if you run into something you need a little bit more, you.
Kind of funny you think he's gonna fix it.
Okay, Justin.
Yeah, we need to get out of the contract after that risk-free period.
Okay, do you know what that fee is by chance? And is this the cell phone service where you get hit up for the rest of the contract?
I believe it is, and that is something we could go back and ask for a shorter.
I don't think that hurts because you just, with the new service especially to nothing, I have no doubt that'll be fine. But
I
to
do
sign a
know-
5-year contract right off the bat is without any history.
I bet you this price will change.
I think so.
I would guess.
Yeah.
Well, do we have a month?
We do it even on residential, and
Yeah.
if you do a 3-year contract, you can save 10% on your bill for them
Right.
per month.
Well, let's review it after 6 months prior to the expiration of the risk-free.
Oh, we gotta do that too. All right,
Okay. We'll be sure to get this on the council agenda in 6 months from now, just as an
Okay.
update.
let's go 5.
For 5 months from now?
We can talk about it again, yes.
Okay.
It does say, after risk-free opt-out terminates and full payment of the remaining months.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Just the other thing along with this, along IT related, we did a cost comparison between Charter and Arvig. Arvig has changed their pricing for internet. This will be saving a little over $100 a month for internet services for both the utility and the city. So that'll cover at least 1 month of this new cost, so that's a good thing.
You have a first and second, you want to take the vote, or?
Oh, that's right.
You can do it.
Okay. First and second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? I abstain. Motion carried.
Justin, do you abstain too?
I probably should.
He abstained.
I thought we saw, I thought we talked about this earlier.
Yeah, they still want to abstain.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yep. They-
Perception. So.
And then the internet, that's part of the same thing? or-
No, internet is a month-to-month service,
Okay,
Okay.
so we could switch back to Charter if we wanted to.
right. I'll make a motion to go switch over to RV internet.
Second?
First and second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Information items, Initiative Foundation, thank you letter. B, waste management, yard waste. Is there any questions on that?
The waste management will be presenting at the next city council meeting in regards to waste management. They're proposing a new garbage can for yard waste, and I understand there's some concerns with some of the council members about that. I will follow up with them before the next council meeting so we can have that conversation with them
Yeah.
in detail.
Letting them know that this is outside of what we agreed to 2 months ago when we entered into the agreement with them.
Okay,
Concur.
I'll follow up with them, and if it does get kind of sticky with Scott and I'll have a conversation.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Public Utilities Commission meeting minutes, city administrator performance evaluation, schools and conferences. Anything else? Otherwise, a motion to adjourn?
Just real briefly, we don't have time tonight, but as per what we talked about in January, with these conferences and schools, we want to hear an update of why we're going and also what we learned from it.
Yeah, Kirk touched on his, with his police officers. Gary got back from training today. He just got back literally before the meeting. He talked about pavement management, managing the lifts, extending the lives. It says extending pavement lift, but it's actually extending pavement lift. So again, we're just talking about how we can maintain our roads longer and best practices for that. So that was a well worth training, even though we lost Gary for the entire day because he got to do a couple hours of windshield time, but well worth the training there. The other thing too, Legislative Action Day, we got coming up on the 14th of March. This is an event sponsored by, I think this one is MMUA. No, this is the league. And that's where we're going to talk about the bonding bill and efforts to see if we can secure some funds. For example, we're not successful at receiving funds for the local road improvement. However, bonding bill, there may be some funding. So we're going to be pushing for those things, and that's a good networking opportunity to make sure legislators know. Rediscovering Cities, I attended that. It's through the MCMA conference. The training was actually really good. Is talking about the environmental standards, new MPCA regulations, also talking about MPDS permits. There was some rumors going around that MPDS permits were going to go down to a half acre. That is not true. That rumor was run to ground immediately. So excellent training. We also talked about staff resiliency, when you have tough council members asking you tough questions, and how to survive in a dynamic community. So,
Okay, good.
thank you. That's all I got.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried.